Today we are diving into one of the most pivotal events in Warhammer 40k history, the Great Crusade. This era marked the foundation of the Imperium of Man and the reunification of humanity, a time that was just basically the best time to be alive if you were a loyal subject of the Emperor, of course. Welcome back to Geek, your first stop for origin stories, lore and more. But if you found yourself on the other side of the Imperium's gaze, well, let's just say you might want to keep your distance until their megalomaniacal crusade wraps up. Megalomania, is that a word? It is now. So grab your bolters and let's jump into the lore. For most of the 20,000s, Terra and its human colonies, they were caught up in a war zone after the Men of Iron decided to throw a rebellion party, kicking off what we'd later call the Age of Strife. During this chaotic time, techno-barbarians, that's my techno impression, ruled over these tiny fiefdoms on what used to be a glorious Terra, but it felt like all hope was lost. Then out of this chaos, the Emperor of Mankind made his grand entrance during the Unification Wars. His army were Thunder Warriors. They're basically these cool, rough-around-the-edges ancestors of the Space Marines. These guys, they were ridiculously overpowered compared to the Marines of millennia later. They were unsustainable as a group and genetically unstable as individuals. It was like a really weird pick and mix combination. Around this time, the Emperor decided that religion was a bit of a downer for humanity and rolled out the imperial truth with a bang, like a really violent bang, as seen in the tale of the Last Church. It's a bit of a head-scratcher, though, as to why the Emperor, being an atheist, feels so out of place in the law. Originally, he and the Imperium were anything but atheistic. In fact, atheistic? Who knows? I don't know if I'm making words up today or not. In fact, none of the disasters that led to the fall of the Dark Age of technology had anything to do with religion at all. Just think about it. Humanity's race of sapient android house slaves went on a massive rebellion. Various alien species were staging epic revenge campaigns for their colonized star systems. And then there was this whole Slaanesh situation which sent human psychers spiralling into madness, while warp storms became as common as bad hair days. So trying to jam the Emperor into an atheist role, initially it just didn't fit. For me, anyway. I'm sure you'll argue with me in the comments. Now, when it comes to the old law, there was no clear picture of what the Imperium originally was. It only suggested that the Emperor ended up being worshipped as a god, with early quotes hinting at this polytheistic vibe, which is kind of like ancient Rome. Terra was kind of just the beginning for the Emperor. He had his sights setting on ruling all of humanity. He'd already pulled some strings to get the Void Dragon sealed up on Mars, which meant he had the Adeptus Mechanicus on his side to whip up some seriously cool weapons for his future armies. And what's an Emperor without armies to wield those shiny new toys? Enter the Primarch project. The Emperor then set out to create 20 superhuman warriors, his sons and his generals. But the Chaos Gods, they weren't having any of it. They saw this project as a major threat, and they just decided to play a cosmic game of hide and seek. So they scattered the Primarchs across the galaxy, thanks to a certain helpful figure who just happened to be their mother. This little twist of fate led to some wild experiences that would eventually turn many of those sons against dear old dad. But fear not, the Emperor wasn't left empty-handed. He gathered enough DNA data to create his Space Marine legions in what would later be known as the First Founding. But at that time, it was just called the Only Founding. He then sent these legions on a quest to track down their Primarchs while also reuniting humanity's scattered colonies along the way. Over the next couple of centuries, the Space Marine legions, they went on a cosmic scavenger hunt to find their Primarchs, and boy, did the Imperium of Man expand. They gobbled up worlds one by one until they were nearly covering the entire galaxy. Along the way, they also decided to play exterminator with a bunch of Xenos species and even wiped out some non-imperial human civilizations like the Interrex, because the Emperor thought that they might just be a little too cozy for comfort. Then there was Fulgrim, who under the influence of his Slaaneshi demon blade had a blast, obliterating Eldar worlds. This little escapade, it created a long-standing grudge between the Imperium and the Eldar, and it lasted for a millennia. Sure, the Eldar had been raiding human worlds during the Age of Strife, but Tough luck for them, right? Most of the Xenos that got the axe had turned human worlds into what could only be described as nightmare worlds or hell worlds during the Age of Strife, which just fueled humanity's hatred for anything that wasn't human. And just to paint a picture of the chaos they were liberating, some of these worlds, they were home to electricity-blasting worm creatures that bred and harvested humans like cattle, and a species that used tortured human souls as power generators. It was intense. When Eldrad tried to give the Emperor a friendly heads up about focusing on stopping chaos instead of just expanding the Imperium, the Emperor was having none of it. But why? Well, for starters, Eldrad had just ordered his forces to attack Fulgrim, not realising that the Primarch was still hanging on to his sanity, thanks to a little thing called the Sword of Corruption. The way the Emperor created the Imperium was a masterstroke designed to be an anti-chaos society, huge and atheist, no less. Little did he know, faith was actually a key ingredient in keeping chaos at bay, but he wouldn't figure that out until the very end of the Horus Heresy. But let's not forget Eldrad's orders were the reason behind those Eldar raiding parties. Not exactly a recipe for trust. Oh, and the Emperor was probably also clued in on the Eldar's not-so-great plan to create a god from Eldar souls to take on Slaanesh, who, by the way, he just loves to drain and devour Eldar souls for giggles. The Emperor announced he was heading back to Terra, declaring that it was time for his sons to show that they were the leaders he always knew they could be. He appointed Horus, the Primarch of Lunar Wolves, as War Master of the Great Crusade, and he took a step back to kind of hang out in the Imperial Palace. But the Emperor was actually secretly gearing up to dive into his next big adventure in star travel. He was working on a webway portal beneath the palace with the help of the Golden Throne. But unfortunately, the Emperor's aloofness from humanity, it just stirred up a whole pot of rivalry and resentment among his sons, and his failure to just fully explain what was going on only made things worse. Serious daddy issues. The Runia's powers were like sharks just circling a wounded fish, ready to pounce on these cracks in the armour, and before long they began to corrupt some of the Primarchs, and just like that, we reached the explosive climax known as the Horus Heresy, which is a whole other ballgame and video, but if you'd like me to go into it, please let me know in the comments. Either way, the Great Crusade, it was a monumental chapter in Warhammer 40k, filled with these epic battles, the rise of legendary Primarchs, and the Emperor's ambitious quest to unite humanity. It was a time of glory, but also one of betrayal and chaos that would set the stage for the darkest days in the galaxy. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the lore, please be sure to give a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit that bell, just so you never miss an adventure in the Warhammer universe. If you've got your own thoughts on your favourite moment from the Great Crusade, please drop them in the comments below. We love hearing from you. Until next time, keep your bolters ready, your faith strong, because in the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. I don't know why I said that like I'm so happy. There is only war.